Most organizations don't have a content problem. They have a system problem. They're making stuff, they're posting stuff, but every project feels like a one-off, and nobody can tell whether any of it is actually helping the business do the one thing a business exists to do in the first place, which is make money now and in the future. So today, I want to walk through the 4 processes I think every organization needs to build a functional content system. I call them the 4 Ps, and they stand for planning, prepping, posting, and performance. And done over and over again, these 4 create a flywheel. Better planning leads to better prepping leads to better posting leads to better performance, and what you learn from performance feeds straight back into planning. You end up with this system that improves itself every time you run that loop. A quick caveat before we start. If you're a solo, independent creator, this might be more than you need. This is really built for teams, companies, brands, organizations, where multiple people, multiple stakeholders have to plan, make stuff, get it live, and measure content together. And it's the exact system that we use to build content operations from scratch. And one more thing, you don't need all of this in place before you start. This is really an overview, and it gets built out and updated over time. So don't let perfect get in the way of starting. Okay, let's jump into the 4 Ps. So the 4 Ps, each one answers a question. Planning. How do we plan what we're eventually going to post? And are we working on the right problems? Prepping. How do we make this stuff? And are we making it in the best way possible? Posting. How do we deploy it? Are we shipping this the best way possible? And performance. How do we analyze what we posted and figure out what we should do more of, less of, or differently? Plan the work the plan, and let the results inform each phase. All right, let's start at the top with planning. This is the foundation for every piece of content you'll ever make, and it breaks down into 12 components. Now, maybe that sounds like a lot, but remember, these don't need to be complex procedures with heavy documentation. Most of them are just decisions that need to be made clearly one time so that there's no confusion or misalignment later. So right at the top, we have goals. Number 1, what is the underlying business model of the company? How does the company actually make money? This might sound obvious, but you would be shocked at how many people working on content every single day can't clearly explain the mechanics of how their company makes money. And it informs everything because content choices are actual business decisions. And for our purposes here, I want to use the guitar brand Paul Reed Smith as an example. I'm biased. So the core business here is guitar sales. And I know that seems obvious, but another way to think about this is how do these companies or this company not make money? Because once you get into creative, this is the part people tend to lose sight of. PRS is not in the business of music performances, for instance, or guitar training programs, or schools, and they aren't in the record business, like they don't own a record label. Second is target audience. Who are we speaking to? And just as important, who aren't we speaking to? You gotta figure this out because we use it as a filter for the content that you're gonna make. In this Paul Reed Smith example, is the target audience people who love music? Is it people who love rock and roll? Is it guitar teachers or guitar players? Is it for people who go to lots of concerts or prefer to hang in their bedrooms? Is it for people who get the satisfaction from watching guitars get hand-built or who prefer to learn to play guitar themselves? Is it for beginner guitarists or expert guitarists? Now, maybe there's some overlap in these, but they are all questions that apply when planning for content. Third is strategy. There are lots of definitions of strategy, but strictly for content planning, I like to think of it as a hypothesis. Why do we believe that posting content will lead to better business outcomes? As in, if we do X, it will lead to Y. What are the underlying assumptions that, if we can achieve them, contribute to our goal? For example, we believe that making learning guitar easy and accessible will create more guitarists and keep our customers playing guitar longer. And strategy connects back to audience as a filter. If we post this video and somebody loves it, is that person likely to be a good customer? And conversely, if somebody watches it and it's not for them, is it actually okay because they were never going to be a customer anyway? You don't need everyone. You just need the right ones. Now, I love something Jeff Bezos talks about, which is the idea of durable business strategy.
I get asked a very interesting question from time to time. What's going to change over the next 10 years? An even more important question that I almost never get asked, and that is, what's not going to change?
What are the durable truths your customer values? For Amazon, that would be faster delivery, lower prices, better selection. Like nobody in the future will ever ask for slower delivery, higher prices, and worse selection. Fourth are content pillars. What are we actually going to talk about? Now, the core question here is, what are we uniquely positioned to offer our target audience value on? And what primary sources are we going to pull from to build a content slate? Is it internal expertise, your business SOPs, talks your CEO has given, sales collateral, industry knowledge that your staff carries around in their heads, etc.? PRS is uniquely positioned to talk about all things guitars, but are they positioned to talk about all instruments, music in general? I don't know. But the further you drift from the core, the weaker it gets, and the weaker it is tied back to the goal. So a rule of thumb is you can move outward from the core as long as it stays connected to the business, but always ask whether it still drives towards the goal. Now, fifth, pick the KPIs you'll focus on. What will we measure to know whether our strategy and tactics are actually working? Now be careful here. What you measure is inevitably what you manage. If views are the only number you look at, views are what you're going to optimize for, whether they convert or not. And if you're just starting out, here's my take. Make total output, post volume, the only metric you track. Don't worry about on-platform metrics just yet. Just focus on shipping work, repeating the 4P cycle, and it's about reps and iteration at first, really. Now, when you're ready to pick real metrics, think about the classic marketing funnel. Awareness at the top, interest in the middle, conversion at the bottom. Most people pick metrics top down. I want you to work bottom up. Start with the core action you want somebody to take. We call this conversion. I actually think that what most people want here is qualitative, not quantitative. And honestly, I don't want to overlook that. So often when you're making content and sharing it with the world, even as a business, you actually want to evoke feelings, not just some specific behavior. You want people to associate you with something, some positive feeling. For instance, if you think that somebody who absolutely loves guitars and loves the feeling they get when they're able to play a song that they weren't able to before is a better customer because of that, that feeling is actually what you're after. That said, there's no practical way to track that. So instead, we have to use a trackable metric as a proxy for that feeling. And so decide which metric you think is best associated with that feeling. I think here's how this plays out in practice. I'm staying on the guitar track here. And so looking at Paul Reed Smith's, their top performing YouTube video, and comparing it with one of Fender's top performing videos, and then comparing it with a guitar creator's top performing video, you can see literally in the comments what their call to action is. And that's really the conversion that they're looking for. So in PRS's example, they're driving to a website like that sells the guitar that's in this John Mayer video, versus Fender, who made a tutorial about how to change guitar strings, and their call to action is to subscribe to their channel. And then lastly, we have this guitar educator, this guy who I actually love, and his call to action is around downloading a free PDF to help people learn from him more. It's interesting to look at, like, these are the things that they're actually calling action to. This is the conversion they're clearly looking for. And I think that tells you a lot about their strategy, like what they're looking for. So like in Paul Reed Smith's example, they want to drive conversion to a website. Like they want people to go who see this guitar, see John Mayer playing it, and go buy it. Versus Fender, who's educating their audience. Now, PRS is educating the audience as well too, but they're educating them in a tutorial fashion, and they're looking for subscribers. They want growth. They're looking for growth on their channel, because I think that they're looking at that as an indicator for people enjoying their content, people wanting to hear more from them. Versus Scott Paul Johnson, who's an educator, and his core business is actually selling instruction to people. He doesn't sell guitars, right? He sells instruction to people. So he wants people to get as much out of the education as possible, and the conversion he's looking for is a PDF download. I mean, these all kind of check the box of getting a lot of views, getting a lot of reach and audience, but at the same time, you can actually see the conversion they're after. And that, to me, is really informative of like where their strategy is at and what they're trying to do. And another thing, I'm gonna go long here because I think it's actually really important. A lot of times a brand will say that the most important conversion metric is something like, I don't know, book sales calls. But in practice, what they actually go for is something much smaller and much more qualitative, like their boss or CEO being happy with the way a video turned out. That's an audience of one person. And too often that is tied to a broad metric like views or followers that doesn't necessarily tie back to the strategy. And this happens all the time. So focus on the customer and pick a metric that ties back to the strategy. And it's okay if you're trying to account for the qualitative stuff. Realistically, that's just brand building, but make sure it ties to some metric that you can track. That's all. 6, parameters. What are the constraints we have to operate within? For instance, we got budget. How much money are we willing to allocate to this? Time. How much time are you willing to allocate to this? People. Who will actually and can do this work? In-house, hire somebody out of house, or a partner? Expertise. What are we credibly able to make content about? This ties back to the content pillars. Access. Who, what, and where do we have access that can be featured? Whether it's founders, employees, some sort of special equipment you might have, a studio, a location. Legal. Are we legally allowed to make content on these topics in this way? For instance, something around licensing. Can you just pull a hit song into your brand content without a license? Well, I don't know. Talking about it is different from actually using it. Seventh, tactics are the specific actions we take that tie back to the strategy. I'll be honest with you, I'm underrepresenting the depth here. There are almost an endless array of tactical considerations, and you'll usually end up doing a mix of them, but here are some to consider. Content capture. Are you gonna do one-off shoots, campaigns? Are you gonna batch capture stuff, do a live recording, event coverage? You're gonna pull from existing stock libraries, you can do sit-down interviews, man on the street style, like there's lots of options here. Or content style. Are you gonna go long or short? Are you gonna go hi-fi, lo-fi? Like, are you gonna use a cinema camera or an iPhone? Are you gonna go video versus static? Are you gonna use imagery and graphics versus video, right? Are you gonna go scripted or unscripted? Again, lots of considerations. In channel selection, are you gonna post things on your website or on social media like YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, X, Reddit? Are you gonna do podcasts or Substack? Are you just gonna show things at live events? And then cadence. Are you gonna post daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly? One thing here is usually you're constrained by the amount you're actually able to produce. And here's the thing, if you're starting from scratch and this feels a little overwhelming, just pick one of each. One capture method, maybe it's like interviews. One medium, let's call it video. One platform, Instagram. One cadence, you're gonna post once a day. That's a completely tactical plan. Just run with it, learn from it, and expand from there. Eighth is an editorial calendar. And what's interesting about this is you might say, oh, editorial, like we're not like a newspaper or something like that. But if you're doing a steady stream of content and putting it out into the world, that is a form of editorial, right? You are editorializing it. It's coming from your perspective, your brand, right? Another way to think about this, if you're a brand, is it's actually branded content. But I like to think of it as an editorial calendar, meaning that you have something that you want to say to the world and you're putting it out there. So to figure this out, now you have your content pillars and your tactics in place, but what actually goes on the calendar? Now there's more than this, but I like to start with 5 sources. First is the business calendar. This can be product launches, events, earnings, a specific sales cycle, company milestones. These are locked in dates that you want your content to accommodate for. Next would be franchises. These are recurring original formats. Think a weekly show, a monthly series, a quarterly internal communication, an annual event, etc. Then we have opportunistic borrowed attention. This is anything plannable that's industry or business adjacent and already attracts your potential customers' attention or conversation. Then we have evergreen. This is ongoing content tied to your pillars. This could be tutorials, explainers, testimonials, something evergreen like that. And then we have seasons and holidays, Black Friday, Christmas, New Year's, tax season, summer, etc. After you identified the editorial calendar layout, then comes what I call content plotting. Think of this as adding placeholders on the calendar. You're not writing posts yet. You're just deciding that something will exist at a given time, assigning it a priority, and then establishing the lead time that it needs to make that content. And the order you fill this calendar out in, I think, matters. The analogy I love here is a jar of rocks. You have rocks, pebbles, and what I call gold dust. If you fill the jar with the small stuff first, the big priorities won't fit. So fill the jar with rocks first. These can be, posts you can plan for that carry your biggest priorities, weekly beats, large tentpoles, the highest priority things for your company. Then the pebbles. These are also plannable, but maybe more evergreen. Last, leave room for the gold dust. Most people say sand. I like to say gold dust because this is the unplanned, reactive, opportunistic posting. And on social, it's often the highest performing content because timeliness and relevance are king. You always want to leave space to react to trends, to big moments, or things that you can't plan for. Ninth, the content ideation process. Once we know that we're going to post something, how do we figure out what it's going to be? How do plotted placeholders become ideas and concepts with actual creative direction? Important note here, we're not coming up with the ideas at this stage. We're just deciding how ideas get created. And this is a preference thing. It genuinely doesn't need to be too complicated. Are you gonna pitch ideas on a weekly call? Do a team brainstorm every Wednesday? Are you just gonna assign one person that crafts the creative and submits tasks off of it? Are you gonna do asynchronous pitching where you build things out in a deck and then somebody approves it. A personal favorite thing I like to do with coming up with ideas is I like to take long walks, and I'll bring like a voice recorder with me, and I'll just record a stream of consciousness, and then I'll come back, transcribe it, and work from that. A minimum viable version of this is, let's say every Monday, ideas go into a Slack thread, right? Person X approves or gives feedback in that thread. And that can be a complete ideation process. You just want to have it decided so everyone knows where to look. 10th is stakeholders. Name the actual people involved. Who does what, and who's available when, and where are the coverage points? This might be something like, Johnny edits videos Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Sally schedules posts every Tuesday from 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. And Tammy is available Monday through Sunday from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. to post manually should something need to change in a pinch, and so on and so forth. And one thing in particular to establish here is who must be included in approvals and who gives the final approval. These can be different people. It's completely normal for, the team director or CEO to weigh in, but for the social media lead to give the final sign off after those people have had their say. Naming that up front eliminates the bottleneck down the line. Okay, 11th is tech stack. What tools are we going to use on a repeated basis to run this whole thing? And there's lots to choose from, but once you have it dialed, onboard people so everyone knows where things live and how to use them practically within your team. Most often, you don't need to be an expert in any given tool to use it functionally. 1 hour of practice on a single project, like actually doing it, might be all you need to get up to speed. So for instance, we use Slack for communications, Google Drive as a digital asset management tool, Frame.io for content review, Asana for project management, Later.com, for social scheduling, Claude AI for AI services, Sprinkler for analytics, Google Documents for scripts, Adobe Suite for editing and design. Okay, one last thing, documentation. You've just made a dozen decisions. How do you record them so that you can communicate them? This is a living document or a set of documents laying out everything we just talked about above. These are used as reference and updated when things change. It's what makes onboarding a new person take, a day or days instead of months. Some formats for this can be, a deck, a Miro board, a Notion project, a Loom library with a centralized Google Doc where you just link things out. And always designate a keeper of the docs, so somebody owns them and then is able to keep them current. I kind of like to think of it as like, that the signs on the back of bathroom doors where it's like, oh, this person came in to clean at this time. Like that's what it should be for maintaining your documents. Like have a place where you can track how and when they've last been updated. Sometimes it's just putting a date and a time on the actual doc itself. So that's planning, 12 components. If you get them down, you have a real foundation. If you're just starting out, again, start with a simple strategy, one way to post, and minimum viable versions, and build out from there. 2 things to remember. First, the foundational 4, goals, target audience strategy, content pillars, these should be the hardest and least likely to change. Second, everything here evolves over multiple cycles, and every upstream change should ripple downstream. If your strategy shifts, your tactics, your calendar, your briefs, they should update as well. That's really a feature of the system. It's not a bug. All right, process numero 2. Number 2, prepping. The prepping process answers the question, are we making this stuff in the best way possible? If planning was deciding on the inputs, prepping is turning inputs into outputs, taking everything you just planned and turn it into actual finished content. I'm splitting this into 2 halves, development and execution. Now, development is where you figure out what your content is actually going to look like. And you only go through a development cycle when you're creating something new. Execution is the day in, day out process of making this stuff. If you already have an established content slate, you can probably just skip this part and go straight to execution. But if you've never made anything or you're launching a new format, a new series, a new franchise, you start with development. So let's look at development first. We start with a creative exploration to establish actual content references. This is a standalone project or sprint to create pilots, proof of concepts for the repeatable formats that you're going to use in the future. And let me be clear, you're actually making stuff in this phase. You work through a single content format and establish the elements that carry forward into everything like it. Essentially, what you're doing is building a prototype. But the best use of a creative exploration is on formats that you're going to make a lot of and use on a repeated basis. Examples here would be, episode 1 of a long-form YouTube series, a video podcast with your first guest, what a good tweet or even a LinkedIn post looks like, short clips, How do you do captions, pacing, editing style, graphic overlays? Like, how do they all look? If you're gonna do man on the street trivia for Instagram, like go prototype one. A day in the life event recaps, corporate communications, product launches. Like these are all things that you might do a lot of, so it makes sense to spend some time up front and get them properly developed. And there are lots of ways to do these things. So this is where you figure out how you're gonna do it, right? An example here would be company product rollouts. These are 3 examples I like. Now I'm gonna break from my guitar, my guitar reference here. I'm gonna talk about some tech companies. So for instance, the head of Instagram, Adam Mosseri, he does lo-fi self-tape videos announcing updates that he posts to his personal account, and he does it frequently, like every week. Claude, the AI company, does high production value pre-recorded series of employees doing product walkthroughs. And Apple does massive live events once a year with fans in the room, high production segments, which stream first on their website. All 3 are forms of product communications. It's the same thing done 3 totally different ways. But a creative exploration is how you would find out what your version is, right? How are you gonna do it? Once you've explored, you build the content slate, the definitive list of formats that you're gonna post with an emphasis on repeatable formats. Think of it as building a menu for your content restaurant. I know, it's corny, yes, but whatever. The goal is a direct reference for every type of content that you're gonna create. A simple, effective version is one deck, 1 slide per format. And on each slide, you can add the content name, the type, is it static, video, audio, written, platform, plus the aspect ratio, 16:9, 9:16, the post type in platform-specific language, be it an Instagram reel, a story, a grid post, carousel, short, a landing page video, a VSL, etc. The length, if that's applicable, like 30 seconds or less, something like that. Creative notes like style, tone, pacing, visual elements, and specific examples. Hopefully you have these from a previous creative exploration, but now you're just adding it to the deck. If the content slate is the menu, then toolkits are the cookbook. For each menu item, you include ingredients and the cooking instructions. A toolkit is a centralized source containing all the documentation for a given repeatable format. It's used by people who are actually making the content, so it comes out consistent and up to standard every time. And once these exist, onboarding somebody new into your style of content becomes like so much easier, way, way easier. There are 4 ways to do this, but you can always do a mix. You can build templates. These are pre-built projects with modular, swappable components, or with core elements already baked in, so nothing starts from scratch. Style guides, a document that visually diagrams the stylistic elements every repeated piece must include. My favorite here are video tutorials. These are step-by-step guides, usually paired with screen recordings. And last, we have written step-by-step guides. These are essentially SOPs, a standard operating procedure for people who would rather just read. The last piece of development is the briefing process, how ideas become briefs. Now you might say, what's the difference between an idea and a brief? Honestly, not much. A brief is just an idea made specific enough that somebody else can act on it. If you're making something, you probably don't need to write yourself a brief, but you should make a brief if somebody else needs to approve the idea, or if somebody else is going to make it on your behalf. Now, I think the easiest and best version of this is a standardized brief, maybe a form of some kind that feeds directly into your project management tool where the project can be tracked and managed. That's it. That's the process. Okay, now we know the types of things that we're going to post. We need to actually go make them and make them all the time, right? So we got 7 steps, and they can really be run on every single piece of content that you make. Step 1, run the briefing process. I'm not going to restate it because we just went over it, but do it on any given project. One caveat here, you can skip this if you have something which is super templatized and you just need to have 1 or 2 variables that get updated, in which case you can just jump straight into creating a task. Step 2, turn the brief into a task. And I should say that I use task and project interchangeably. A task becomes a project and a project is a task. And here's the thing you have to know about projects or tasks. They change. That's their nature. Date shifts, deliverables get added, creative evolves. This small idea that somebody got excited about becomes a big one, halfway through. That's all good and it's typical. You just need a way to track it. Okay, I think this is important. Briefs are one-way doors. A brief doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be enough to take action on. Once the project actually starts, you don't need to go back and update the brief. The brief dies so the task or project can live. All the change is going to happen in the project management phase of this. When you turn a brief into a task, Here are the fields I think you should have. Creative direction, that's the what. Assignment, that's the who. A due date, that's the when. Project status, it can be, a request in progress for review, complete, and you update that gradually. Deliverables, what's actually being produced. Specs, often aspect ratios like 9:16, 16:9, 4:5, etc. Notes or watchouts. These can be, calls to action to include specific copy or red flags. Targeted references. These can come in the form of a link or a repeatable format from your own slate that you've already developed. Step 3, start making the stuff, right? Go make it. Anything you make passes through some version of 3 phases: pre-production, production, post-production. Whether it's a full shoot or a designer building a carousel, each phase can be robust and complex or lean and simple. I'm not gonna go deep on them today, but just know this is where the actual making happens. Step 4, review. Every piece of content that goes out will have at least one person reviewing it and giving feedback. People assume this part is just common sense, but I really haven't found that to be the case. There should be a structured way review happens, so there's total clarity on how things go back and forth and what you're actually looking for at each stage. Basic things like, where do files get uploaded for share links? Are we gonna use Dropbox, Google Drive, Frame.io? Where do things get looked at? In a player on Frame.io, in a deck, as a Slack attachment, emails? Where do stakeholders communicate changes? Are they gonna write comments directly on the video? Is it gonna be a Google Doc? Are you gonna do a live review on a call? Make these decisions up front and onboard everyone into them, because when you don't, it honestly can lead to chaos. Step 5, approvals. Only 2 things to know here. Who gives the approval and what exact words or behaviors signal that something is approved? Be specific. The simplest version is the approver writes the word approved wherever they manage the project. Everyone is familiar with the idea of like final. That gets old really quick. So you need to have an unambiguous signal that something is finished. Step 6 is the QC process, or quality control. This is to confirm accuracy and confirm the assets are error-free. And a big note here, QC is strictly for error check. It is not a second round of review. You shouldn't relitigate creative decisions that already passed through the review process. There are some nuances here, some exceptions, but those are really the exception and not the rule. Find errors, fix them, and then move to delivery. Step 7 is delivery. Where do finished things go? Usually a server or a DAM like Dropbox, Google Drive, Frame.io, or an owned server. And I actually like the upload itself to act as a second indicator that a thing is done. Once it's in the delivery location, it's finished, finalized, ready to post, which is why I actually think it's great when a delivery can live somewhere separate from where the review happened. This might just be a dedicated folder. Okay, that's the prepping phase. Now, let's go to posting. The posting process answers the question, are we deploying this stuff in the best way? Now, when I say posting, I mean publishing publicly or even privately, but for use in the real world where other people will see it. One note here, this is really for organic content. There's a whole other process for getting paid content live, which I'm not gonna go into here, even though there's a little bit of overlap. First, we have packaging. Do you have everything you need to get the post live, not just the asset? These are things in addition to the asset, like title, thumbnail, caption, descriptions, chapters, SRT files, tags, collabs. And one note here is that on opt-in platforms like YouTube, where click-through is required, best practice can often be to conceive the title and thumbnail back in ideation, sometimes before the video exists. I'm adding it here because it's just required to post, but I know that that's a thing. Second, scheduling. This is where placeholders become actual posts. 2 decisions here. What tool, meaning on what are you going to do on platform or use a third-party scheduler, and the details. Do you have the right day, the right time, the right platform, the packaging attached, everything good to go. Some things you'll post manually in real time, and that's fine, of course. Then, right before anything goes public, whether it's scheduled or getting posted manually, there should be one additional layer of QC. Review the finished post. Make sure it's going up the right day, right time, right platform, free of copy errors and inaccuracies. Watch the thing down. Click through the carousel one more time. Then schedule it or get it posted. Third is community management. This applies especially on social media. So what is it? It's engaging directly via some specific action on the platforms where you post, ideally with people who've engaged with you already. Another way to think about it is any action taken on platform in reaction to a post. And to do it well, you actually have to be listening and watching the platforms where you post, right? You have to watch your accounts. seeing how people engage with your brand. Now, I didn't make this up, but here's a breakdown for how to do community management. There are 4 ways. Customer service. This would be responding to questions or complaints directly. Banter, engaging in conversation. Surprise and delight. This is inserting your brand into a moment for someone who isn't a customer yet, but going above and beyond anyway. I would say do this tastefully. We all know it can get weird. It can get weird quick when brands are interacting with people. The first 3 happen via replies, comments, DMs, or even likes, reshares, or retweets. And then we have hero brand moments. The brand going above and beyond in response to specific people who engaged with them, opportunistically turning community management into a full campaign. Let me give you a real hero brand moment that we worked on. A woman named Kelsey posted a video, completely organic, on her own account. And in it, she's in tears, telling this story about walking through a Target and being hit with this wave of nostalgia for, when her kid was little and she used to use Pirate's Booty to help keep them calm while walking down the aisles. And in the same video, she pitches Pirate's Booty on an ad based on that memory. The video goes viral and Pirate's Booty was listening. They picked it up and they committed to actually making her ad, which she lays out in her first video. And so that they brought us on to make an animated version for her. She reposted it. And I just think it is a great example of a hero brand moment where a brand was paying attention, catching a moment, and then turning one other person's post into a whole campaign in a way that's organic and feels authentic instead of forced. Last, tracking. Every post, every activity tracked somewhere, whether it's in platform, in a tracker, in a CRM, a document. It doesn't really matter where as much as that it exists at all, because we're going to use that data in the final stage. All right, number 4, the performance process. The performance process answers the question, what could we do more of, less of, or differently? And now this is where the whole thing becomes a flywheel. First up, we have data aggregation. Where do results actually get gathered so you can assess them? Is it going to be on-platform analytics or a third-party CRM, CMS, analytics tool that pulls everything, including site data, socials, into one place? The only requirement here is that you can get at the data and see what happened. Number 2 is performance period. Set the time frame you organize data around, whether it's daily, weekly, monthly. Honestly, lifetime is really just not a good performance period, right? 3 is review. You got to look at the data. You have to actually sit with it, see what happened before you can learn anything from it. We find this is actually a great spot for leveraging AI, being able to feed it data and have it help organize and structure it in a way that's actually useful. 4th is synthesize. Connect the data back to your goal, your strategy, the conversion metric that you chose in planning, your quality standards. Is this actually hitting our targets? That's the question you got to ask here. Is it making a positive impact towards the goal? Then draw insights. These are takeaways, learnings, and adjustments that need to be made to the process or the outputs moving forward. The question is always, what can we actually learn from this? Presentation. Gather the data and your insights in one place so someone else can look at it and understand it without having to do a full analysis themselves. This is really like translating it for people who might not know how to read this stuff as well as you can. That's the best way to think about it, especially if you're like a data nerd. Not everybody knows how to do it, so make it in a way that they can learn from it. 6 is the decision. After the insights, what behavior actually changes for the next cycle, if any? There's really only 3 options here. Repetition. Do the same thing again. And this is underrated. Sometimes the answer isn't to change anything, it's just to do more of what's already working. Iteration. Do almost the same thing, but change it based on feedback. What needs updating? The process, the content itself, how something looks or gets made? Subtraction. Stop doing something. This is also underrated. Okay, last here we have actionable next steps. If something is changing, what's the updated process? Do we need a whole new creative exploration? And how are we going to inform the team? Like, how are we going to actually communicate these changes or what's needed? Do we need education or training? Who needs to know? And how are we going to tell them? Those are actionable next steps. Usually this happens at the end of every cycle. Just make it in a way so that the next steps that need to take place are able to be moved on. And that's where the cycle repeats. The changes that you just decided on flow back into planning and the loop runs again. So those are the 4 Ps: planning, prepping, posting, and performance. Okay, I know this might seem like a lot, but just remember what I said at the top. This is really, this whole system is the destination. Every one of these processes has a minimum viable version of itself. So run short loops, make decisions, test, iterate, start with one thing and then expand. Because if you put these in place, you've built a flywheel. Better planning leads to better prepping leads to better posting leads to better performance, and better performance leads back to better planning. Every time you run the loop, the system gets smarter, better, whatever, faster, stronger, right? And every upstream improvement ripples through to everything downstream. It's really just about making decisions up front so you don't have to make them over and over again later. That's it. Clear decisions made once so that your team can spend its energy on the work instead of figuring stuff out over and over again later. And honestly, these things build on themselves. They really do. They compound. And the more you invest in establishing them, the better the content gets, the more aligned your people are, and the better the whole thing runs. So that's it. Those are the 4 Ps. That's all I got. Thanks.